Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions and the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. In this episode, I interview Jason Foscolo. Jason is the food lawyer and is one of the attorneys using the subscription model the longest, up there with Kim Bennett and Jess Birkin. Like those two, and also like past guests Kim Felton, Maria Worley, Brandon Leopoldis, Joanne Holmes, and Matthew Stevens, Jason has a singular defined niche. In order, that's trademarks, nonprofit law, immigration, startup law, sports law, Web3, health law, and now with Jason, food law. I've had attorneys focusing on a couple of practice areas like family law and estate planning, and I even have an upcoming interview with an attorney using the subscription model for family law and finally, criminal defense. The moral of the story here is something you already know, and that's a more sure way to find success as an attorney, and especially with the subscription model, is to have a well-defined niche. Jason provides valuable insights into how he did it, and we can all learn something from his approach to serving clients. Thank you to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later. And remember to use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. It lets them know you found out about them from the podcast. You get 10% off, and it really supports the show. For subscriptionseminar.com, I'm still taking firms off the waitlist one at a time in the order they signed up, so sign up now to get your spot in line. I'm an active participant in the process of helping you use the subscription model, so I could only work with so many at a time. Thank you for your patience. The podcast is finally getting more traction, so please rate and review it if you haven't already to help others discover the show, and as always, please share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. Jason, welcome to Law Subscribed. I'm so happy to have the food lawyer of the food law firm on my podcast, a tried and true subscription attorney. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we've had a chance to chat, but how about you go ahead and introduce yourself to my listeners?
Sure. Once again, my name is Jason Foscolo. I run a solo practice. Well, one plus 1.5 attorneys practice called Jason Foscolo P LLC, but you can find me online at thefoodlawfirm.com. I'm basically general counsel to a bunch of food manufacturers scattered across the country. And I've been doing that for about 11 years.
Now, when you graduated from law school, did you know, okay, I'm going to go into food law, or is that something that you stumbled into?
Yeah, as the first time I met you, I told you about how embarrassingly haphazard my trajectory to this actually was. But I have no shame, so I'll go over it again. I was in the middle of law school. I decided to join the Marine Corps, and I was a judge advocate in the Marine Corps for 5 years. And I was stationed in Japan. I lived there for about 3 years. I got out. I served 1 year in the Pentagon. So I lived in Alexandria, Virginia for a little while. That was pretty cool. I got out somewhere around the financial meltdown of 2008, 2009, 2010. And I really didn't want to go back into criminal law or something like that. So I was looking for a career transition. And I had found, almost by accident, a fantastic program at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, Northwest Arkansas, at their law school at the time, it was the only one in the country only LLM program in the country in agricultural and food law. So, suburban kids from Long Island, never stepped foot on a farm in my life except to pick pumpkins. I washed dishes in a diner at one point, but that's the extent of my culinary experience. I decided to take that program for my transition year out of the military, and that's kind of how my direction in food law started.
Yeah, I do want to get into the food law, but I do just want to ask you one quick question on the Marine Corps thing is a JAG is, because I recall when I was looking into that when I was in law school, that's that type of job, you're a Marine first, attorney second, unlike the other JAG opportunities, right?
Yeah, that's the reason why I picked the Marine Corps over all the other branches. I got to do at least a year of running, jumping, climbing trees kind of stuff, all in Virginia. So I actually did a real officer candidate school where they scream at you and try to get you to quit. And then right after that, you go to this thing called the basic school, which is basically a 1 week crash course in everybody's job in the Marine Corps. So for 1 week, you learn how to, play with radios and break them down, and they're very heavy, and then you carry them all over the woods. That's called training, and then you do that for the logistics stuff, and so on and so on. So it's like 6 months of general education. You have like 9 days of what's called machine gun week, which sounds like the coolest thing you could possibly imagine. But you end up sitting in a classroom for 6 of those days, carrying the guns for 3 of them through the woods, and those are heavy too. And then they let you shoot like 12 rounds out of a 240, and that's the end of machine gun week. So maybe I picked the right branch, maybe I didn't, but they kind of oversold it to me a little bit. But yeah, it was a great experience. It was definitely a non-traditional legal education. I got to do
Yeah.
trials pretty quickly. I got to do criminal defense work really, really fast as soon as I started my career, actually.
But what everyone is wondering is, did you ever get to tell somebody, or did anybody tell you you can't handle the truth?
So I used to like that movie, right? And then there's a part in there that, like, I can't watch the whole movie because when Tom Cruise is sitting in Demi Moore's office, he's like this very, very young officer, and she's a very senior naval officer, and he's eating an apple in her office, like in her face. And I just can't do that, because the naval officers I've known would have thrown Tom Cruise right out the window if for doing something something that blatantly disrespectful. So I can't suspend disbelief when I watch that movie. It's very grating to me, and that's my problem. It's still a very good movie. This is my crazy. It's not a critique of the movie.
So okay. But getting back into the story, and we're not going to leave your Marine experience fully behind. We'll tie it back in. Did you? So tell us. Did you go solo right away? Start your own practice? Did you work for somebody else after getting that LLM? What was the next step for you?
Yeah, again, it was like this weird twist of fate where just failure was not an option. When you're in that program, it sets you up really well to go to a Tyson or a Walmart, like Tyson Chicken or a Walmart or something like that, because they're both based in Arkansas. A lot of people go into federal administration with the USDA or FDA. Anybody like USDA or FDA royalty like goes through that program at some point. The department heads and stuff like that, and vice department heads, they really go to that program. It's got some great luminaries that are alumni of that program. But that wasn't for me. And then, the last thing you could do is probably go to like a big law firm that does, food and agriculture. There are a couple of food and agricultural practices that are part of like bigger firms, but those are basically the three options. And they either weren't calling me back, or I just wasn't interested in them. It's mostly they weren't calling me back. But that was kind of where I was stuck at. It really nothing. There were no jobs out there that appealed to me. But I did notice the utility of the subject matter almost immediately, because the law we do is kind of, it's pretty intrusive. We don't even have like free speech in the food business. We actually do have some prior restraints on speech. So that was like, intriguing to me, that you have this very, very comprehensive body of regulatory stuff, and we eat billions and billions and billions of calories every day in America. So the idea went into my head very early. I was like, wait a minute, all the jobs I see out here, yeah, they're probably soliciting companies like General Mills. Those guys probably have excellent representation. But I knew intuitively that there were, very successful companies that were publicly traded that were probably using like Uncle Louie's attorney in town that actually didn't know the subject matter or focus on the subject matter. So I thought that was pretty intriguing, and that's what my intuition kind of drove me to look at that. And lo and behold, I found like almost nobody doing what I do today. Looking for those, quite successful businesses that don't have the benefit of a, specified general counsel.
Yeah. It was a great discovery of that gap in the market. And even with like the future of things rapidly changing, everybody's got to eat, and so food isn't going anywhere. And so to become like the food lawyer, and that's your thing, like that's a pretty safe space to be. Meanwhile, you've got personal injury attorneys dreading self-driving cars because accidents are going to stop. When there's all self-driving cars, what are they
Yeah.
gonna do? Or
Yeah. And what a DUI guy is going to do? When,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
What are
No,
they gonna do?
that's very good.
And another thing is even you'd think tax lawyers would be safe, but if we ever implement a flat tax and get rid of all these exemptions and rules and complicated tax law that we have, and have like a very simple flat tax, like a lot of that administrative work goes away. That type of
Absolutely.
compliance thing. But everybody's got to eat, man. Like
Absolutely.
eating's not going anywhere. Like I
I,
said to you on our call, I might have to do food law out here in Illinois.
let's hope that not everyone takes up gardening or something like that. That puts me out of work.
Right. Yeah, if we all start sustaining ourselves, well, I suppose. I mean, this is a long time off, Jason. I don't think you have to worry, but I suppose if we all started 3D printing our food right in our kitchen, I mean,
Yeah, well,
you still how is the material that 3D prints the food made, and how is it regulated for ingredients and instructions on what's allowed to be put into the 3D printer? There's still going to be regulations around food and what goes in our bodies for that kind of stuff, I think.
yeah, absolutely. It is kind of recession proof too. I mean, I don't think I've been through a recession yet, but the pandemic, like the first 6 months of the pandemic, felt
Mhm.
pretty close to that. There was a lot of uncertainty, but I was like the busiest I ever was. Like the supply chain disruption stuff put a lot of work in front of me because people were submitting purchase orders for ingredients, but then they couldn't get to assemble finished product, and they couldn't get an ingredient or something like that. And I had like tons and tons of UCC transaction stuff coming in.
Yeah.
Nobody's bottom line dropped at all during the pandemic. Everybody still needed to eat, and the orders still flowed through. There were a couple hiccups that I had to help everybody with, but yeah, it did appear. I was kind of relieved at that point that it did appear to be something like bomb proof economically.
Everybody's got to keep eating. So
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. Now, so you started your own thing, and with a name like Foscolo, it almost sounds like you got solo right in there. So it's almost like fate itself was telling you one day you were going to be a solo, at least for a while, till you were a 1.5 attorney firm, and
Yeah.
but how did you start out, like the business side of things? Like where did you even go to learn that? Because we know you didn't learn it in law school.
Yeah, it was kind of like it was like a sink or swim thing. I mean, I was getting through this program I was in. We inopportunely chose to start a family at the exact same moment, so there was that gun to my head, and nothing else was happening in the job market for me. There was no real prospects, and whatever was out there kind of didn't appeal to me. So I had to do something, and I did this. I started applying my trade as I started holding myself out there, built a website. And then the first thing I started doing was like thinking about, what would a farmer need? What would an innovator need in the food space? What would a food factory need from me? And I just started writing a bunch of blog posts. Don't do this, don't do that. Call a guy, call me if you need help with this issue, and I just started blogging and blogging. And again, this other fortuitous thing, like the food law firm, that was an open domain. Like I never going to get that lucky again. But there was just I really was pushing in an open door, kind of. I got lucky. Like I wish I could tell you that I was so brilliant and so smart. I saw the light shining on the horizon, and I immediately had to run through the swamps and jungles to it. It was just one good intuitive decision after another that kind of got me here. Not some multi-decade plan.
Right. And then, even just for things like setting up an IOLTA account, how do I charge? Like where did you even go to find that? Or did you just Google it and just give it a shot, see what happened, talk to the bar association? Like what made you just make those business decisions in the beginning? What helped?
I used a couple resources like that. I was like, went to the New York State ABA webpage. So you decided to start a solo practice, something like that.
Yeah.
But I was just using, very basic public access stuff. I had I'd never worked in a law firm before. So, I did feel like I was inventing the wheel a little bit, but there was a couple of attorneys along the way that I spoke to, who were like local to me.
or friends of the family and stuff. I did get a couple conversations like that, not impacting their time too much, but I did have those conversations, and they were very like stodgy guys. Like they were all stodgy folks. Like they were all transactional attorneys, and they wore a suit to their solo practice every day, and it was all of that stuff I really didn't like. Like the picture on their website would be them, in like a pearl necklace standing in front of a bookcase, or in a gray suit standing in front of a bookcase with the law books. That just never kind of appealed to me. I was just never that guy. That didn't fit me.
Yeah.
But they did give me some help here and there, some pearls of wisdom here and there. But basically, the whole thing I just started from scratch, kind of on my own, based on the responses I was getting from the clients and what they needed and what was important to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. I mean, frankly, that's what they teach you now too, is come up with your customer avatar and what are their needs and what do they look like. And you just sort of intuited that. Also, if I may, I think all those, correct me if I'm wrong, but all that experience and all those lessons you learned, going through the training that seemingly had nothing to do with the law, and just being able, even just being able to get through it. I mean, didn't that experience at least, somewhere, help you be like, okay, if I could get through basic training, I could start a law firm. That's easy. That's not carrying a machine gun for Machine Gun Week, right?
Yeah, no, it was something related to that. It's like you go for 5 years through the Marine Corps and you like never get a compliment. They just don't do that. They make you go. They go out of their way to make you feel like you're never doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
So the volume was turned way down on my ego and stuff. Like I've been called terrible things before. What's the client going to do? Just not return my phone call, not work with me anymore. That's not nearly as bad as anything that had ever happened to me before. So I did have a thick skin. I had a, turtle shell on my back, basically, that I listened to the feedback. Obviously, I totally internalized everything that I was getting from the client, but it never hurt me or stopped me. Like I just kept going forward, and I had a million failures, tons of them. I don't want to talk about them. But no, I'm kidding. I'll talk about it. But I did internalize it.
We're skipping over the first 5 years of your solo practice. We're skipping right to the subscription model, because let's be honest, before you hit that subscription model, comparatively it's a failure, right?
Comparatively, like I had always paid the bills, and I was 8, and we went on a 3-day weekend away to Maine or whatever if I wanted to. But yeah, the subscription thing is what really turned it up. But even that I was responding. Again, I was responding to client feedback and I was the same old guy with the same old skill set. I was just repackaging it in a way that made people think, oh, let me plug this dude in all the time now, rather than when I'm in trouble or something like that. It was just a rebundling of everything.
Yeah.
So my skill set changes, grows, happy to say, but I had 80% of me formed in my, 80% of my skills formed like a few years ago. And that's the stuff I reshuffled around and put into the subscription package.
Yeah. Yeah. And so walk us through now a little bit of that origin of that thought process of like, okay, you know what, I need to do it differently. I need to use the subscription model. Like, what were the series of events, or did you have an aha moment that was like, I'm moving to the subscription. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So I started, putting like a very loose Venn diagram together in my head of certain services that overlapped in the food, in the food space. So the 3 buckets in my practice are the regulatory stuff. So black letter law, something that the FDA says about marketing a product, right? Then there's this big chunk of like commercial agreements in that second tier. That's like stuff you would only find in the food space. So we call them co-packing agreements or private labeling agreements. They're third-party manufacturing agreements, but you're talking about making and producing like a recipe or something like that. You wouldn't find many of those types of agreements outside of the food space. So that became like the second area of my specialty. And then there's a bunch of general practice stuff that any food business would need, like trademark, a little bit of corporate law, stuff that I never thought I would ever need to learn how to do, but I had to figure it out because the businesses need it. So, once I had those 3 things, those 3 kind of buckets kind of conceptualized, I started to realize that they do overlap. The FDA won't let you say, sir, or the USDA. They won't let you say certain words on your branding unless they're true. Which why am I going to get a trademark for somebody, even though I could, they have a clean availability opinion and I could actually grab that IP for them? What good is it if I don't actually tell them the FDA is going to be mad at you if you use it on your package?
Right.
People are making all sorts of warranties on the front of their package that could expose them to, class action suit, but yet they're using a third-party co-packer that is not aware that they're making the claim. So, I have some litigation risk and some regulatory risk for this labeling thing, but I have to, that really doesn't work unless I go and tell your co-packer, your manufacturer, oh, by the way, this is important to me, so I need you to make sure that there's never any gluten anywhere near my product or something like that. So I did start to spot these areas where I'm like, I need to actually, if my retainer agreement says trademark, I have to ask you labeling questions too. How do you put that on a retainer? That sounds weird. Why am I already asking these people for stuff that's outside my domain? That looks kind of funny. That looks like I'm trying to glom onto more than we bargained for, but I could still be useful there. And there's a million more examples like that, or that cross-pollination thing that I could bore you with. But that was kind of the genesis of the idea. I need to be around to do a lot of little things rather than big dramatic things. And I need many more touch points and much more frequency of engagement rather than depth usually. And that's that's where the germ of the idea started. And then it was just a question of getting them presenting that to the client in a way that made it reasonable to actually pay for it.
Yeah, that's been, I think, a lot of the pushback. The way that you put it is a lot of little things, more frequency and not as deep. Lawyers, everyday lawyers you speak to, that they're swimming in water and they don't even realize it. They're like, well, deep stuff is what I do. That's why people pay me $500 or more an hour for the deep stuff, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of legal issues out there, or a lot of legal avoidance things that are not deep, right? So,
right.
So you just sort of this like came to you, and then how was it that you decided the subscription made more sense than just like lowering your billable rate?
So I offered it in addition to, the first time I did a subscription was when my last kid was born. He was born in 2016. So I was like refreshing the website, and I was really trying to, on my webpage, I was trying to re-articulate what it is I do. And I was writing these kind of cross-pollinating blog posts, which gave me a nice little SEO boost. But, at the same time, they were starting to lay out the idea of, hey, if you're getting your label reviewed, let's also look at your trademarks as well, for example. And I was writing these blog posts and I was cross-linking them all together. It drew kind of like this nice web. And I said, hey, let's try this. So in addition to the hourly stuff, which I still do, I just put up a little page for subscription-based work. And I made sure that on every one of my blog posts or services page, on my service page, it referenced the subscription. Hey, if you have a food factory, you're always going to need legal. Why not think about this? And I didn't think it would do what it did, but I published that. And then within about 2 or 3 weeks of me publishing that, I started getting calls about it. And the food business CEOs were like, tell me about that. That's interesting. What does that entail? And then I would talk to them about it. Like they would call me for some relatively minor regulatory issue. And then I would explain that to them. And then they would go, that's interesting, because I do have this other matter over here. And, I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm new to this, or I really do have a lot of money flying around in my big food business. And that would be nice to have you there as the guy to look at all this stuff while it's happening. Mm-hmm. And it went quick. I mean, like I said, I articulated how all the stuff is related. I linked to that part of my site, and then boom, I immediately started getting questions from the food business CEOs, and I signed my, the first client within 4 weeks, something like that, of me just posting that sketch out there. And it pitches very smoothly, because by that point I had known how I could be of value, and I could articulate that very, very well. And I had always communicated that kind of frequency of engagement concept, but now it was like in a marketable way where the client knew okay, it's only going to cost me X number of dollars per month. I'll take it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And these were institutional clients. By that I mean they had hired outside counsel before and paid them by the billable hour, or were these, were these, I guess clients who were coming to you, they had never even hired an attorney before, either because they were too afraid or they just didn't want to be charged a lot of money.
It was both. So some of the, it's kind of like 80-20. So 80% of the firm are 80% of the firm clients are, successful, say 10 million and up food businesses. And when I get introduced to one of those clients, I'm retained by one of those clients, they generally have the expectation that I'm their guy, and that's just on a go forward basis.
Mm-hmm.
Because they fall into exactly that group you mentioned, that is the institutional type. They paid $600 an hour, and they're looking to go on a legal diet, and so they bring me on. The other folks are entrepreneurs, believe it or not, who are like, I'm starting this new thing. I'm from the graphic design background, or I'm from the medical device background. I know nothing about food. It's gonna be nice to have a wingman with me for 120, 150 days while I get my feet underneath me. And they're probably the other 20% of the client base, and they come and go. Sometimes a couple of them have turned into institutionals, while they've been with me. But the expectation for them is that after a certain, a startup does not need an attorney on staff. I say, call me when you hit 1 million in sales, and then we could talk again. But, for a lot of them, I basically said, yeah, it's good. You don't need me anymore. You're a basically trained food business CEO. You know exactly when you are in deep shit, and you gotta call me for real, and, go and be fruitful. And by the end of that little cycle, they know everything they need to know about food labeling. They know everything they need to know about UCC transactions and buying and selling food products to a co-packer and suppliers. They have a good trademark downrange, and they basically know, the limits of confidentiality agreements and how to handle their IP. That's kind of a couple other things in there, but that's like the main backbone of the, the startup CEO cycle.
Right. Right. I mean, it just shows you that there's opportunity there. There's opportunity for these entrepreneurs who never would have even probably to raise the capital that early to hire an expensive lawyer. So they would have just done it themselves anyway. So they're not even hiring lawyers. So you're not really competing with anyone there, which is a great space. When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional-only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database, since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high-quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSubscribed at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney, or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form at scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSubscribed at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. And then for the institutional clients, I mean, billable hour lawyers, beware. Right? I mean, because that was just, 6-7 years ago. What would you say? It was 2012 that you first put out that blog post. So, that was a while ago now, but like more and more, and hopefully with this podcast, clients are going to get wise. And so, that's a great space that you found. You've mentioned your website a bunch though, but so I do want to ask you about it. But before I do, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, just real quick. Attorneys focus on their billable hour, I think, a little too much. I'm sure there's like water walkers out there that I could never come close to, beltway guys or something, beltway folks or something like that. But the hourly rate is what you charge, and someone can always chisel you on that, and you could always make a deal and make a bargain. I have 3 service plans, and I don't think anyone's ever bargained with me to turn one of them down to like a lower rate or something like that. It just doesn't happen.
Mhm.
There's kind of a hack there where it's kind of no one even tries to debate that number. But I use to measure what I am, to measure the client. I use what I would call an effective hourly rate. Some clients are perfectly content to pay you for 3 months before they call you, and over the let's say a 1 year look back or something like that, your annual effective rate with that client is far more than you're offering as your hourly rate to the people that are just walking in to do a single service.
Mhm.
So that's something to consider. People are not paying you for the hour; they're paying you for the relationship. They'll actually, you're probably undervaluing yourself if you're giving an hourly rate out there. People will actually pay much, much more for an effective hourly rate for you, just to keep you. Hey, I got a guy. Don't worry, he's gonna take care of it. For them to be able to say that, that's worth sometimes into the thousands of dollars an hour for an effective rate rather than the 100.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you have to be tracking, too. Like, even though you're not billing your time in the traditional way, you have to know like how much time you're spending with these clients to even know what your effective rate is. And there's no one right way to go about alternative fee arrangements, right? Like I'm personally in the camp of I don't even want to think about effective rate, but I also only billed by the hour for 5 years. And so I didn't do it for like so long where I'm like that was like my mindset. But I've interviewed now a number of attorneys where they're thinking about their billable hour rate, but they're not billing by their time, and they're super happy. And so, but at least for you, you found that your effective billable hour rate can be, depending on the client, over $1,000 an hour, which is great. I mean, if that's what listeners need to hear to convince them that this is the way to go, then I can't support that enough. Going back to your website, but also your three levels. You have them on your website, which is really well put together. I like the
Thank
website.
you.
I like the orange is a good color, stands out right against the white background.
Thank you so
And
much.
yeah. And you've got you got 5 on here altogether, but ramp clearly is just like let's get started. It doesn't sound like a subscription thing. You've got the sustain, the boost, and the excel. Those are the 3 that
Mhm.
you were talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, and then for the serious clients, you've even got this. It's separated out, so it's a little bit further down the page. But the colleague, where you're like fully integrated into their business. Now, I'm assuming that's just like a super subscription for your seriously dedicated clients, right?
Yeah, everybody gets the same thing, right? So it's not like, oh, I don't answer emails after 8 o'clock for that program, but for this one I will. Like, everybody gets the same stuff. They just get more of the same stuff. So the client feels a little bit more confident about saying, yeah, let's get Jason in the meeting. Like I won't just tell him what I think is important. Let's actually make him sit in the room virtually, right? So it gives them more time for them to say, you know, let's bring this guy in on this. That's really all the difference between the plans, and they're 2, 4, 6 hours a month for the sustain, the boost, and the excel. And that's like 85% of the plans are that. There's a couple of ramps in there, which is just, I'm talking you through a problem, rather than typing, or filing, something like that.
Right.
And that colleague one is basically something like, 10 hours a month, 12 hours a month, related to the effective hourly rate concept. I don't really keep close track of I track all of my time, but I'm not, writing people and saying, oh, you're at 10 hours. Sorry, wait until next month, or I'm going to charge you again. I let people slide all the time. I could still be magnanimous.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'm very magnanimous, so none of these plans are hard and fast. It's just, I do track my time. And if I do, like, say, a 90-day look back, and I'm like, hey man, I'm actually at 8 hours. You really like me. We should talk. I'm at 8 hours a month on your 6-hour plan. We should really talk. It allows me to do that. But honestly, I've rarely done that. And when I've ever had to upgrade somebody, they're totally fine with it.
Because they're using you. That's the point.
Yep. Yeah. So tracking is important, but if you're an attorney, so is lightening up a little bit, and just trusting that it will even out over time. And if it doesn't, somebody's going to be receptive to, you have the evidence right in front of you that they love you and they need you. So
Yeah. So also, because this is what my listeners like come for too, is like to talk about like the way that you're doing it. So I see on here you have the certain amount of month commitment. So two of them is 3 month commitment, and Excel is a 2 month commitment. So why have you chosen to do that? Have you ever actually had to enforce it? And do you see clients like leave after their official commitment is over?
So I have those mins on the site, but their retainer agreement says, drop on request. I need some filter in there to make sure that people don't just sign me up, crush me with a bunch of work, and then cash me out. Because you do get like an hourly. I don't want anybody the hourly rate's higher than the plans. That the hourly rate for any of the plans basically. So I don't want anyone to come in with a very, very small plan, squeeze 6 hours worth of work out of me, and then pull the plug. I don't want them to have that expectation when they call me, when they schedule the meeting. But when they get a retainer agreement to sign, it says you could cancel anytime. I've had a couple of those. I've had some people get ill. Some people's need to shift priorities from one business to another. None of that 80% block. I haven't been let go. This is amazing. I haven't been let go by any of that 80% block of institutional businesses. They stay. So that's extraordinary. But I've had like one or two of the 20% types need to reprioritize and pivot, and I just pull the plug, no problem. I'm not holding anybody into a thing like that. I would never do that.
Right. Now, you separate out because I have seen, I've interviewed one lawyer on here, Outhouse Counsel. They do, yeah, they sell like blocks. So they're like 10 hours a month, 20 hours a month, 40 hours a month, something like that. And it's just all encompassing, like they just sell the hours. But what you've done is you've carved out emails and 15-minute phone calls from the hours of legal work per month included, right? So like if a 15-minute phone call, does that count towards that 2 hour? Because I mean, I'm not. It doesn't maybe look like it does right away on the website. So how does that work?
Yeah, it doesn't. Like that's my incentive to say, look, if you call me once or twice a week, I'm not going to count that against you. Like if I'm sitting down and I'm researching something, or writing an opinion memo for you or something like that, yeah, that's time. But I'm trying to tell you that you can call me as often as you need me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to incentivize you to do that, because the more information you give me, the better I can direct your 2 hour, 4 hour, 6 hour legal resource. So I need to comp that time. That's one of the pieces of advice I did run past, like, an old school attorney, and they were like, oh, they're going to kill you with that time. They're going to take total advantage of that time. No, that food business CEO, she's going to spend time with her kids too. She needs to get to the gym too. And as affable as I am, no one wants to talk to me all day. People don't do that to me. They don't abuse that. So, that is me trusting the client with my time, and they have never disappointed me, let me down. I never need to rush anybody off the phone. They got stuff to do. So that's a great tool. Comping that time, quote unquote, comping that time. That's a great tool for them to get more familiar with me, get more ease around me, and get used to the idea that you really shouldn't make a decision over $1,000 without just calling me for free and telling me what's on your mind. So that's one of the better things that I've done.
Yeah, yeah. The more attorneys I see you doing that thing, which I'm doing as well, is the greater relationship you can get with your clients. And I've yet to come across an attorney on this show that has not had success with going as far as unlimited communications of that kind. So let me see here. Now, there was also another page on your website. So before you get to the service plans, you also have done something that I've been hesitant to do, but I'm glad you're taking up the real estate and giving an example of how to do it, which again I think is going to be really important for listeners. This is on the How We Work tab for your website, where you say what makes us different. And so you have the food law firm versus traditional law firm. And so I've seen some versions of this. Start.law has like a version of this on their website as well, their startup law firm on subscription. So why did you decide to do this, and how fun was it when you got to say how much better you were than a traditional law firm?
You see, that's funny. It wasn't a gloating thing. It was just, I love subscription. I would love for it to be for everybody, but I do have the wind at my back a little bit with manufacturers. So when I wrote that page, I was
I was talking, like you said, I was talking to that avatar of the food manufacturer. So these people will plunk down, you know, $90,000 worth of glass bottles and put it in their factory in a warehouse for a year. It'll be a year's worth of stuff, you know, for them. And that's how they think. Okay, no matter what happens, the world comes to an end. At least I have my glass bottles, right? They'll do the same thing with labels then. And then they'll do the same thing with pepitas from Mexico. Whatever it is, they stack in a pile. They're like hoarders, you know, they stack things in a pile and they budget it in their head and now they're good to go. They do math for everything. I was trying to communicate to them that if you do it this way, I'm a little pile in your warehouse of resource that you can trickle in to your production. So that was me talking to that avatar that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's. I mean, it's put so well. Have you actually had like a literal conversation with one of your clients that sounded a lot like that?
Pretty much the way I talk to you is the way I talk to clients, because you know they are not, you know, they are like wrench turning folks, you know, they are producers, and if the math shakes out for them, they're going to be down with it. You know, they all have this is the thing about the plans too, like they all have a legal budget. So every real business, particularly these food folks, you know, they plan it 12 months out. They all know what they spent last year, and they put 4% onto that, and they know what they're going to spend in 2023, right? I give them their plans. I give them, you know, a price sheet for the service plans, and I say, hey, based on what you're telling me, your needs are about this much. Here's a price sheet. You go figure out what your resources are and how fast you want me to work, and then just pick a plan and tell me. I'm not going to upsell you. I'm not going to, you know, so they're looking at their whole card, you know, and they're telling me what their budget is and how fast I need to work on these things. So it's like a tip of the hat to them that I'm not twisting your arm. You're actually in control of this budget, and I may have to change my velocity a little bit, but I'll work with what you give me. So that's them putting me in a little pile, big pile, medium-sized pile in their warehouse, and I defer to them entirely on how much of me that they need.
Yeah, yeah, and you've sort of been touching on it sort of as we go, but it comes down also to like just being good at sales, right? Which is an important aspect of being a firm owner, is being able to sell, you know, your own products for what you're offering. So how did you get good at that, or is that just a God-given talent?
That's a great way to phrase a very, very loaded question. And it's so tempting to take the God-given talent answer. I so want to take that, but I can't do it, in all honesty. It's again, it's feedback. It's feedback and experience. So I actually know what I can do now that I couldn't talk this way about myself 5 years ago, because it wouldn't have been honest. You know, I could do it now because I've done it so many times. I've done the legal work so many times, and I've also done the pitch so many times, that it comes easy, because it's, to me at this point, it's like self-evident. And you know, that client, that stereotypical client that I'm going for, that avatar, they know I'm talking like a guy who knows what they need. You know, so it's, unfortunately, it's not God-given raw talent. It's failure and experience and all that boring stuff that kind of got me here. But yes, you're right. You need to articulate your value, and you need to be able to explain to another expert how you are going to valuably integrate into their business. And sometimes you just can't fake that. That's like not talent. That's just hard experience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But getting feedback is good on everything, including how well the subscription model is going. So like, have you gotten direct feedback? Maybe not like scientific feedback, but have you gotten like direct feedback from the clients saying like, I love the model, or here's what I don't like about the subscription model? Like, what has been their input on the way that you charge them? Obviously they're subscribed, so they like it, but have you gotten like, you know, more detailed input than just they're still clients?
I don't really ask that. I want to ask more feedback from clients. I do get, like you said, I do get low definition. I get low fidelity information, because some of them have been here for like 5 years. So that absolutely astonished me. I never thought that would happen. I never thought that I would get that much longevity. So I'm so grateful for that.
But, if they're here for 5 years, that's low fidelity information that they like what they hear and they like the service. But I've actually never, this is something I probably need to get over, but I've never actually asked the client, tell me more, tell me what I can improve. What do you like? What don't you like? I feel hesitation to impact their time for my benefit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a thing that's like a failure of me. I think I need to get over that because, they're really smart people, and I think I could benefit a lot from some of that kind of guidance. I'm hesitant to ask for it because I don't want to adversely impact their time. If they're still here, I take that as enough of a green light that I'm kind of doing the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, and sitting in my chair, what I'm about to say is easy, but I would think that they wouldn't mind giving it because that helps you help them. Like it's still about helping them, right? So if it's phrased in such a way where you want to make sure you're serving them better. And sometimes it's even like a third party comes in and does those types of things too. I know we've had like the lawyerist folks on here. I don't know if they do that specifically for their members of their lab, of their program, but I got to imagine there's like, third parties that help with that kind of thing, even if it's low touch help where it's still you talking to them, like getting like a coach to like coach you on how to do that. I don't know. I don't have any coach to recommend to you, Jason, but I got to imagine like it would ultimately help them and help you. But since we don't have their direct feedback per se, what about yours? Like what has been some of the things you wish you would have known when you got started with this subscription model that you do now, that if you could have started doing it 5 years ago, you would have?
I don't know. I don't know if I would have been ready for the road in my first 5 years of the service. In my the first half of my legal career, I don't know if I would have had it in me to be able to identify and articulate the value. I think, like I said, this has been haphazard at times, but I've made pretty solid decisions spontaneously. I haven't planned anything necessarily, but I'm just like, let me see how I can make this better. And then I've just kind of taken those paths less traveled, but I took them right at the time where I had the experience and the knowledge to pivot. That I had to be aware. I had to realize it myself. I could not have done this right out of like the LLM program and said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Oh my God. It took me get my ass kicked for a couple of years and, trying and working very, very hard for a decent wage, for me to be able to actually say to a food business CEO, no, I can do that better for you. And this is all it's going to, just pick a plan and I'm starting tonight. I couldn't have had that conversation until I was ready to have it. So it would have been nicer to have that knowledge earlier, but I'm thick-headed. I'm thick. It took me 5 years to figure it out and how to be able to, spot that value and identify that value. I think everything worked out exactly as it could have, right? As it should have. It was a right place, right time for me to make that pivot.
Yeah.
And that's very personal.
Yeah. With the time that we have left, I just have a few more questions for you. Run us through the technology that you're using, because certainly, when you're not billing your time traditionally in that way, especially these 15-minute calls and whatnot, you want to be able to automate and do things as quickly as possible, right? So, so what are you thinking about, like when you're doing the even things like business development, right? So like what technology are you using to power your subscription and do all that stuff?
So there isn't much that's all like fused together. So I'll use a couple little analytical tools to see which one of my blog posts are generating leads, and I'll tweak those or promote those. People usually land on, like I said, there's kind of a trail of breadcrumbs strategy on the site where someone will have a question about food labeling, but then I'll reference another article there about manufacturing, and then before you know it, they set up a call for me. They set up a call with me using Calendly, or they'll call the office. All that stuff is integrated into the website, and then they get on the phone with me. I talk about their issue, but I also tell them about this other service plan thing that I do. And you work that in organically, or they mention it, hopefully. And that's it on the the lead generation piece. Really, it's not that I could probably make it much more complicated, but
what I've got going is basically passively working splendidly.
Mhm.
Once they're in our system, we have Clio, and Clio is now, I think maybe 4 years ago, they integrated the customer service thing and the client management thing together. I can't remember what it was called before. Well, when it was independent, but that's fused into one now. Very, very easy to get a retainer agreement out now. I mean, we only have 3 service plans that we mostly use. Like, 85% of the clients are on one of these 3 plans. We just drag the client's CRM information into that template for like Boost or Sustain, whichever one they pick, whichever one they tell me meets their needs. And the retainer goes out. Funds are earned upon receipt. It says so in there. And they sign that with their finger on their tablet, and they fill out a credit card authorization, and they're now a subscriber. It takes, if someone says yes to me on a phone call, I can be hired in 12 minutes. And that's all internal to Clio. And then we use like just a basic credit card provider to facilitate payment. So yeah, again, about 80% of the clients pay with a credit card. They're points farming or something like that. We do a couple ACHs, but basically it's all credit card, and that too is executed electronically. And we really don't use like a LawPay, or some legal specific credit card processor for that. We just use a general run of the mill service provider for that, because like I said, the funds are earned upon receipt according to the retainer agreement. And then I use Clio for time management. So I do record my time. I do record all my interactions. If I want to see how a client's doing, I just, divide, say 3 months or 4 month look back, divided by their plan size. And I see how many average hours they're using over those 3 months to see how much they love me. And that's it. It's technologically like pretty easy. I mean, there's not a lot of stuff I need to do other than that. I use the upload download feature with clients all the time on Clio. Clio's, I think, is pretty good. It doesn't do subscription that easily, but yeah, there's really not a lot of I think it's still pretty low tech. I'm totally open. I'm gonna listen to more of your podcast more intently about how I can make it even better. But it's pretty, Gutenberg.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Well, I'll tell you something you should consider, because I know while you do give so many hours for the legal work beyond just the talking to them on the phone side of things, instead of having to hire more lawyers when you get to the point of scaling even more, if you implement some kind of document automation, like Gavel is a sponsor of the podcast, so you get 10% off if you use the code LawSubscribed. So there you go. I'm giving you you get a discount. So you could start automating documents that way, so you don't have to. You could take on more clients and scale that way, even if they're getting more value out of those 2 hours that they used to get, because now you could do more with less. Well, you can bring on more clients anyway, so it's not even a big deal, right? So there's that, but the one more thing I want to touch on that we talked in our pre-show call that I just want to have my listeners know is at least sometimes now, right? Like you're living a 4-day work week life because of this model that you have set up. Is that right?
Yeah, don't tell the clients though. I don't want to brag about that.
So this is a cut. This is a cut from the show.
No, I'm just teasing. No, it is. It is a quality of life thing. I mean,
well, okay. So hold on. Let's start over because I'm gonna come back in and edit this. We'll just talk about you've attained work-life balance, because just in case a client listens to this, you know what I'm saying?
No, I'm kidding. I'm totally joking.
Okay.
I take calls on a gondola when I'm skiing, and it's like no big deal. That's actually what they pay. They're paying to have the guy that they need proximate, and we're not doing firing squads here.
Right.
I have certain events that are like hot, like recalls and things like that. But basically everything else is 9 to 5. So the clients work 9 to 5 as well. So most of it can wait until Monday, but I'm always willing to accommodate somebody if they have, a need that's hot. But they're incredibly understanding, when I'm not in the office or something like that. So yeah, the work-life balance is perfect. And I'm fine with saying that usually Thursday, 2:00, I start to kind of check out. Some days, again, I'm still on the air. Like I don't mean I'm like going to the Azores. I mean, like,
Right.
I'm gonna go do something with my kid, and if someone calls me, I got a phone in my pocket. Of course I'm gonna respond. But basically, yeah, it's a pretty good gig in that respect. I know how I'm going to do with a 6-month look forward. because of the subscription. Like I can identify at this point which folks are kind of going to be here without any major disruption to the income.
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of roughly predict what my commitment is going to be based on the number of those subscribers that I have and my knowledge of what they're about to do. You know, I know if they're about to launch a new product someplace, I'm probably going to get some calls about that. You know, so I can actually plan everything nicely this way because I talk to every client once a week and I say to them, "What do you need from me? Here's what I did last week. What do you need this week?" You know, I went to Florida for 5 days for spring break with my kids. I worked my ass off for Monday and Tuesday, but I identified in the week prior what everybody needed, and it sucked for those 2 days, but I was basically, you know, left to my own because I could actually plan things and still give the client their value, but you know, I'm at the beach, you know. So it all works like you, and again, I have the wind at my back. This is just a special kind of practice area where I don't have to put out too many fires. It's usually pretty deliberate work, but you know, yeah, work-life balance. I'm a happy guy that I have no complaints about the compensation versus time and seat. It's 4 or 5x my income from off the hourly stuff that I used to do. And like I said, it's the same skill set in my brain that I had before. I just repackaged it and rebundled it. And, you know, now because I charge differently for it, the income hockey sticked up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that brings us to our last question, Jason. And that is,
Sure.
Is a hot dog a sandwich and why?
And
And I'm asking the food lawyer here. So this is the first time I've been able to ask someone of your caliber, of your you know, speciality.
that's the one question that's caught me flat-footed for this entire hour. That's actually pretty brilliant. I would just call it a forkless sausage, you know, or something like that. Something there to that. Sandwich to me means like a cold cut, and it's got to the whatever's inside the sandwich must be wider than the bread, non-compressed. Because I'm from Long Island, and that's how we Long Island doesn't do much right, but they know how to make a sub. So that's my definition of a sandwich, and anything else has to fit some other thing.
All right, that is definitely a unique answer that I received to that question. So
Yeah.
so if anyone wants to follow up with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, they could email me direct, jason@foodlawfirm.com. I love to talk about subscription. It's my favorite thing. And I've done some things like this before. I've had conversations like this, public conversations about subscription. And usually I get a flurry of people contacting me. "Oh my God, that's amazing. I'm about to do that. Can you help me?" And I always say, "Sure, I will 100% commit to helping anybody that wants to try and do this with their practice, because I'm just intellectually invested in the idea, and I'm karmically invested in other people doing it too." But you know what? I've never had someone take me up on the offer to I've never had anybody else pull the trigger on it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'm not as persuasive as I think. But nevertheless, I would invite anybody, if anybody's thinking about doing this, I would totally entertain a good 20, 30-minute conversation with anybody about it and how they can do it for themselves.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for that offer to my listeners. So that's it, Jason. Thanks so much for coming on Law Subscribe Podcast.
Thank you so much. It was really fun. It's great talking to you. And I'm gonna go check out Gavel.
Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for sponsoring this show. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with someone you think would find a value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.